Okay. All right. Well, thank you for answering that question. Lee Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Commissioner, for coming and taking these questions. I'd like you to tell the committee, please, give examples of cases of racism, misogynism and sexism which you personally witnessed while serving as a police officer, and what did you do about it?
I have always been tough on standards in the organisation.
I didn't ask that. I said give me examples of sexism, racism and misogynistic behaviour that you've actually witnessed whilst being a police officer.
I can't remember any immediately.
You can't remember any?
No, I can't.
Well, I find that very difficult to believe. I think everybody watching this would find that difficult to believe that you're in charge in cleaning up the Met Force. Really, it's your responsibility, but you can't actually remember any. You seriously expect the committee to believe that?
So as a senior officer, I have sat on many misconduct panels. I pretty much dismissed everybody who's come in front of me on those panels. I've always been very tough on that.
I asked you what you'd actually witnessed yourself. I find it pretty hard to believe that a police officer with years and years of service with an organisation has not witnessed any of this when we know it goes off. Because if you have, you must be walking around with your eyes closed.
So there are many officers in the organisation. So when you look at the case report and all these issues, there are officers in the organisation who are angry and upset because they recognise this and they've had these experiences. There are officers who haven't seen it and don't recognise it. People have different experiences in the organisation.
Have you actually witnessed it? Racism, sexism?
I've seen nothing like that in the Met, no. But I've only worked in the Met for 6 years as a very senior officer. It doesn't come across your desk in that way, which is why I talk about
it. In the time you've been in the police?
I'm not going to try and test my memory to go back to the 1980s.
Right, okay. I think that sort of answers my question. I think it would appear that you're in denial.
Not in denial at all. I've been more forthright about the need to reform and the need to confront standards in policing than any commissioner for decades.
I would imagine that anybody else in any other industry has witnessed this type of behaviour and would admit to it and say, yes, it does exist, it has happened, I have witnessed it. I think you're probably the only person I've ever met that would say they can't remember.
I'm not going to get into a case-by-case discussion.
Just one case then, just one case.
No, I'm going to case-by-case discussion. I'm absolutely determined to tackle the issues in the organisation. I've always been tough on standards and I'll continue to be. We are going to reform the issues that need tackling. I need the support of politicians in dealing with this. I need the regulations to change and I need the help to build on the work.
Support of politicians, Commissioner, you've got to be honest. And to sit there and say you can't remember that when you've witnessed these incidents, I don't think that's very honest at all.
People don't misbehave in front of senior officers in that way. That's an unrealistic question.
Have you always been a senior officer?
Of course I haven't. I joined policing in 1987.
Did you witness any?
The behaviour in the 80s and 90s was very different to today. Of course it was.
I said, did you witness it?
Of course I've seen things that sort of weren't fit for today's standards, but I'm not going to get into detail about that. Okay. Today we're about reforming policing, and we need the support of politicians to do that, to help us with the right regulations. We've already doubled down on standards, as I said. We're sacking officers at twice the rate. We're having the biggest look at professional standards that has been done in 50 years. And that is a sign of our absolute commitment. We started that from day one of my time as Commissioner, and I'm grateful the Home Secretary is looking to help us by changing the regulations.
Well, I think you're going to wriggle on after that one, Commissioner. I'll try another question. We've seen protesters once again in Parliament Square, setting up some sort of Glastonbury on Thames gazebo with some pretty poor artists, if memory serves me right. So do you agree with the recommendations? I think it was by the policy exchange that there should be zero tolerance to these sort of events. And we shouldn't be putting up with antisocial behaviour. And just this morning, we've seen protesters on Whitehall around Parliament Square, probably as you was coming into the building. Do you think it's time that you left the Ivory Tower and got out there on Whitehall and sorted these people out? Because people of London, the tourists, the people that work at this place, and the taxi drivers, the bus drivers, they're getting fed up of it, and you're just letting it happen. You've got the powers now to do this.
So there's current bill bouncing around Parliament which hasn't come in yet, so those powers aren't in existence yet.
It's not strictly true, is it? You can move these people on. They're obstructing the highway.
So we could have a long conversation about public order law.
Why you're not moving them on?
Well, because you're
I don't want a long conversation.
You're making selective comments based on a partial understanding of the law. I do not want Londoners disrupted any more than anybody else does, but the law is very clear that protest is disruptive, and to a reason and to a certain extent that is allowed. That is what the law says at the moment. Now, you might not like that, but I have to work to the law rather than
Not right.
rather than win. Now, it is right.
It's not, Commissioner, but
So it's, you might want to believe that the law says that no disruption is allowed whatsoever through protest, but that is not the case.
I think you might want to believe, Commissioner, that you know that you're doing your job correctly. I don't think you are. But I'm just going to ask one more question or make one more statement, because I feel like I'm wasting my time with you, to be honest. You say you took 5 years out of the force. There's probably people listening to this today wish it was a lot longer, and I'm one of them. Do you think you've got the confidence of the public?
I'm not going to sit here, if people want to be personally offensive, then write it in newspapers, but I'm not going to answer those questions.
Okay, I don't think we want to be